Welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl. Hey guys, welcome back to Fast Keto. I am thrilled to have you here with us today. We are interviewing one of our favorites here, Dr. John Limansky, the keto biohacking doctor, and I love having John on the show. He's always full of inside information, and he just has so much experience dealing and working with people and clients with regards to their health and optimizing their health with keto and with different biohacks. And today we really delve into some of your most common challenges when it comes to keto. And I put out a call for people to share what their biggest challenges are when it comes to doing keto. And there really were a few recurring themes that really centered around food cravings, portion control, and making the keto lifestyle work for you with regards to your social interactions and family interactions. And we really delve into all of that, including the hormones ghrelin and leptin, and a little bit also about how John personally has evolved his own keto diet over the years. We talk about keto travel hacks, and we talk about dairy and why it may or may not make sense for you when you're doing keto, depending on what you're optimizing for. So I hope you guys enjoy today's episode with Dr. John Limansky. All right, guys, welcome back to Fast Keto. I'm so glad that you're here with us. We have one of our favorite doctors here with us, Dr. John Limansky, the biohacking MD. Welcome back, John. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Vanessa. Always good to talk to you.
Well, we have some really great topics to dig into today, and we're going to talk about your favorite hormone, which you've been on a campaign to rebrand as the gremlin hormone, ghrelin, which is great. So we can share more information, some of your knowledge on that, and leptin, and the connection between nutrient density and some of these hormones in terms of satiety and fullness. And we're also going to dig into some of the common challenges that people experience with a keto diet and get some of your feedback personally on that, because there's a lot of recurring themes that people kind of deal with the same kind of challenges. So I think there's certain things that it'd be great to get your input on. But I want to start out just by talking about, I know you did a presentation last year at KetoCon about ghrelin specifically and leptin, and then also sleep and those kinds of things. So what have you uncovered about ghrelin sort of in your research, and what do you think is important for people to know about it?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for mentioning my rebranding of it as the gremlin hormone, because, it's really one of these things where when your stomach is rumbling, I mean, that's basically an indication that ghrelin is, surging. And I think we talk a lot about macronutrients and hitting our macros and different ratios. But the question really becomes, what allows people to be successful? And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from my experience is that feeling of hunger is really something that's going to be detrimental to most people who are trying to maintain whatever type of diet they're eating. So whether it's keto or carnivore or paleo or primal, it doesn't really matter which one you're talking about. Feeling hungry like that is really going to be something that's going to be detrimental to most people. And so maybe we talk a little bit about what it is, but also how you can manipulate it, how macronutrients will manipulate the surge and the kind of overall levels of ghrelin, because I think that is something that maybe isn't mentioned much in the internet world.
Yes, and I've read that ghrelin is a hormone that is associated with higher weight in people in general. So why is that?
Well, again, if you think about it, so in general, ghrelin is a hormone that is released and it basically drives hunger. But the question becomes, what is actually driving that hormone? And it's multifaceted, so there's multiple things that are affecting it. At KetoCon, I talked about the sleep impact on this hormone, but there's other things that can really influence it. So fasting has a significant influence on not only overall levels, but also the peak of those levels. So in general, you get peaks about 30 minutes before you're hungry. And so let's say you're somebody who eats 3 times a day. Well, if you actually look at the levels, you'll see 3 spikes throughout the day. If you were to change and all of a sudden now you say, okay, I'm only going to eat twice a day, over time you'll see that there'll be really 2 spikes of the hormone, and it correlates to about 30 minutes before your kind of normal eating pattern. And so I find that to be fascinating. It's something that we can manipulate based on our experiences. If you do fasting, and I'm talking a little bit longer term fasting, a couple things will happen where you'll actually lower the peak level of the ghrelin surge. So before you're about to eat, instead of having a massive spike, you'll have a lower spike, and that'll be associated with lower levels of hunger, which is also one of the reasons why when you're in an extended fast, your hunger levels don't kind of spike as much as they used to. And I know you've done experiments with fasting. In my experience and with people I work with, they'll notice that over time, obviously not the first few days, but over time, their hunger levels will actually dissipate. And before we'd say, well, that's because you're in ketosis and you're having higher levels of ketones, and so your brain is kind of controlled. And that's part of it, but it's also partially due to this hormone is not being excreted as much as it was before. And so that's one thing that I think is not really talked about enough. Other things that really kind of control it would be things like insulin. And so to answer your question, insulin and ghrelin kind of have a inverse relationship. So if you have much higher levels of insulin, which people who are obese tend to do, you will have sorry, not inverse, they're directional. You'll have higher levels of ghrelin release. So you'll be hungrier. But there's also another component, especially when you're talking about obesity. And let's just assume, for kind of argument's sake, that you're having obesity because you're mostly on a carbohydrate-based diet, right? Well, they've actually looked at what is the impact of macronutrients on ghrelin secretion. And so studies have looked at, okay, if you eat just glucose, if you eat just protein, or if you eat just lipids or fat, what is the impact on secretion? And interestingly enough, carbohydrates have a significant effect on secretion of ghrelin, but it also tends to kind of go down significantly much more than the other macronutrients. But 60 to 90 minutes later, you'll have a massive rebound in ghrelin. And so anybody who's eating like a bowl of pasta and then 60 minutes later is starving, part of that is because you have this massive rebound spike in ghrelin. And so it's driving your hunger levels again. And so I think that's probably one of the main reasons why you see these levels to be higher in obese individuals.
That's so interesting, because I was just looking at this study that said that ghrelin is affected more, like the reduction in ghrelin after eating is affected more by carbohydrate and protein than fat. And it's like, oh, that's interesting.
It's counterintuitive to look at, right? You would think that with fat, because we say fat is more satiating, actually protein is going to have a significantly more of an impact on ghrelin than fat, although they haven't really looked at different types of fats. So the question really out there is, well, is saturated fat going to be more effective than monounsaturated or polyunsaturated? And we don't really know that answer. But the real takeaway point from, I don't know if it's that study, but the studies I've looked at, is that you get a massive rebound afterwards, and that's really what's driving this kind of hunger level 30 to 60 to 90 minutes after eating a high carbohydrate meal.
Yeah, I guess that kind of goes into one of the topics we were going to address, which is nutrient density and their effect on these hormones. And I just had this thought while I was traveling in the last few weeks that kept recurring to me. And I was wondering if you had seen any research on the impact that the nutrient density of your foods might potentially have on leptin, for example, the antithesis to ghrelin, which is our satiety hormone, and ghrelin as well. But it would make sense logically that if you're eating nutrient-dense foods, the more nourished your body is, the more it's getting the essential amino acids and essential fats that it needs and all the micronutrients. that your body would be less hungry and more full and satiated. So I was wondering what your experience was with that.
Yeah, so in general, if you look at kind of gene expression of leptin, and this is mostly done in studies with like pigs and mice, um, if you have higher levels of nutrient density, and maybe we should kind of explain what that means first. So nutrient density basically is the idea that per calorie intake, how much of the actual nutrients are you getting? Are you getting, for an example, if you were to drink a soda, you're going to get, let's say, 100 calories of pure glucose, but there's no nutrient content in that. There's no micronutrients. There's no selenium, zinc. There's really no benefit of that, right? It's empty calories, as it's called. And the reason it's called that is because you're not actually getting anything that the cells need. And in order for your body to function appropriately, there's a concept of that you're extracellularly nourished and you're intracellularly depleted, meaning that within the cells themselves where you're generating all the energy you need for the processes throughout the day, you're not getting any actual nutrients or micronutrients such as the ones I mentioned, copper, zinc, selenium, that are needed in order to actually allow for these cells to function properly. And so these are still putting out signals saying, okay, you need these micronutrients, and that's really driving the kind of leptin, ghrelin accretions. And yet you're still putting on weight, assuming that you're getting enough caloric intake, and you are getting caloric intake, you're just not getting the micronutrient intake. And so if you look at studies that look at gene expression, you will see that there is an impact, low kind of nutrient density types of food, and whether or not leptin is actually secreted. And leptin, just for those who don't know, is kind of the antithesis of ghrelin, where it's really going to allow for you to be satiated. Again, we talk about these things kind of in a simplistic term, and it's a lot more multifaceted than just A equals B. But in general, I would say that the more nutrient dense your food is, the more controlled your hunger levels are going to be, the more regulated leptin is going to be, and the more controlled ghrelin is going to be.
Yeah, and I've definitely noticed it for myself just in the fact that keto has kind of veered me towards eating more nutrient-dense foods, and then I've had this experience of really fasting completely naturally, intermittent fasting for hours and hours, and it's so helpful when you're like out for hours and hours, or you're like, I noticed it a lot on the trip. We'd be out, going to these temples for like 8-10 hours a day, and I really wasn't worried about that, about when my next meal would come, because I knew like I was really well nourished from the nutrient dense meals that I was eating. And I think a lot of people have that experience and they find it surprising, and I used to have this meme that I would post, and it was like, I'm first world problems, like I'm so full all the time, I can't eat all this delicious keto food. Like a lot of people experience this feeling of just being really full, maybe for some people for the first time in their lives, of being like so nourished and so full that like even being bored and like wanting to snack on something, like they're just too full for it. And it just makes sense that there would be some, mechanisms going on behind that would explain it.
And I think part of that is, and I've noticed this with myself, is when you are out and doing things, I have found that that's when my hunger levels are controlled the best. I'll go hours if I'm active doing something and then realize, oh, I probably should eat something, versus if I'm sitting around working at home and just the idea that there's food there will actually drive me to eat more. So I think there is still a component of kind of social and just almost like a repetitive notion that there's food there, I probably should eat something. And it's more out of boredom than anything. But if I'm out and about and there's really no access to food, I can go long periods of time without even realize that I'm hungry. And so I'm not surprised by your experience. I think that's pretty typical for those of us who have experienced ketosis and kind of understand the signals again of what real hunger means, right? It's not, I'm just sitting around and bored, so let me just eat something. It's, okay, I'm actually really hungry and I should consume something.
All right, guys, I know that you care just as much as I do about feeding your families the most nutrient-dense, high-quality food and meats, and also being able to save money and be on a budget. That's why I love ButcherBox. It saves you time and it saves you money by not having to go to the store and shop. And you also get incredible deals. They have a brand new promotion that is running in March, and it is for anyone who signs up that is a fan of Fast Keto. You can go to butcherbox.com/fast keto, and if you sign up, you will get free ground beef for life, plus $20 off for signing up using my link. And that's butcherbox.com/fast keto. You get free ground beef for life. That's 2 pounds of free ground beef in every monthly ButcherBox order that you get for the life of your membership. Now, this is a great way to save money, save time, and be able to feed your family nutrient-dense food. So check out the link. I'll put it in the show notes as well. It's butcherbox.com/fast keto. Yeah, and then you have that combination of being really well nourished from eating nutrient-dense foods and then being fat adapted and having this, constant energy access and ability to access that stored energy at any time, which is it's just such a great combination. And you see so many people who've experienced it, they just rave about it because it's such a cool feeling to be, independent of needing to think about food all the time or worrying about when you're going to, get to eat again or whatever. So you have more energy to just enjoy your life and do fun activities and be living and not sort of, focused or overly focused on when you're going to eat again and what you're going to eat and that kind of thing. But when talking about these different hormones, especially with ghrelin and leptin, what are things that people can do to sort of, I guess, ideally you would want to have lower levels of ghrelin and higher levels of leptin? Is that correct?
Yes, in the sense that in general you want ghrelin levels to be lower, but you also want the spikes before meals to be lower because it's a kind of dose-dependent response. So very high levels of ghrelin drive hunger levels because the way that they're working is they're working in the hypothalamus of the brain, and they're kind of competing for the same receptor. So ghrelin and leptin are kind of battling against each other. And so you want to kind of maintain the balance where leptin is taking control, and so you're feeling full more often. And so a couple ways of doing that are lowering ghrelin, and the best way is to fast. So if you do a 3-day fast, that's going to significantly lower your levels of ghrelin. And then when they start spiking again, they're not going to be as high as they were before. So you won't get this huge dose response, and your hunger levels will be more under control. Ironically, actually, we used to tell people to eat 6 times a day. That actually will increase your ghrelin level. So the more often you eat, the higher those levels are going to be. And so doing kind of a time-restricted feeding, eating within a 6-hour window is going to significantly lower those levels as well. So fasting is going to be the best, intermittent fasting is going to be the best, then the macronutrient concentration. So doing maybe of a higher low protein component of keto probably is going to control your ghrelin levels better. Interestingly enough, if you take people who have had gastric bypass surgery, so not the sleeve, but actual Roux-en-Y, where they cut the stomach and the small intestine and they rearrange it, that actually significantly lowers ghrelin levels, and we think that that's one of the reasons why people are more successful with controlling their appetite that way. And so, and it's just basically you're resignaling the kind of neural network, and so you're not getting these massive spikes as well. And the other thing, too, that is a significant impact on these hormone levels is sleep. And so if you are getting good, deep REM sleep, that's going to lower your levels of ghrelin as well. So intermittent fast, long-term fast, sleep, and then the kind of macronutrient component of your diet are going to be the most important things.
And what triggers leptin the most, or what helps people feel full and satiated? Similar kind of lines?
Yeah, so again, and all of these hormones are impacted by insulin as well. And so things that kind of raise leptin High glucose concentration, high insulin concentrations also will raise it. Obesity, so adipose tissue secretes leptin. And then things like emotional stress. So anything that's really sympathetic predominant is going to raise leptin levels as well. And so your question was, do you want to have higher leptin levels? Yes, but to a degree, because if you have significantly high levels of leptin constantly circulating around your body and mostly driven from adipose tissue that's producing it, you'll develop leptin resistance. And when that happens, it's very similar to insulin resistance, where you're really downregulating the receptors, and so you're not getting the actual satiety that you want. And so you'll see that pretty predominantly in people who are obese with a lot of adipose tissue. They're secreting a significant amount of leptin, and yet their body's not responding to it because they're resistant to it. And leptin resistance is going to be, pretty significant. But on the flip side of that, if you look at studies, actually very, very low levels of leptin is actually going to be worse for you than leptin resistance. So it's kind of probably finding that sweet spot and really addressing those things that kind of control leptin, like I mentioned. Of course, fasting is going to be the best way to lower leptin. And so one study looked at, fasting for 16 hours, and they saw a reduction in about 57% of leptin levels. So pretty significant. Sleep also. So melatonin impacts leptin production. And if you have, good sleep, high levels of melatonin, you're going to have lower levels of circulating leptin, which again is something that you want, that sweet spot. So especially for people who are obese, kind of trying to downregulate leptin is going to be something that they're going to try to focus on so that they're not having leptin resistance.
I think it's so helpful to explore, especially these two hormones, because I was mentioning to you that I put out a request for people to share what their biggest challenges are with doing a keto diet. And first of all, did a quick poll, and about half the people, about 50% of the people who responded are total beginners to keto. So I try to keep that in mind a lot with the content that I share. Like, you and I have been doing this for a long time, and then you get to kind of these different stages in doing a keto diet, and yet at the same time, there's so many people coming to this for the first time that reinforcing and focusing on the fundamentals is so helpful. And I noticed that there were several themes that were reoccurring. I think there were over 200 comments, and yet they all kind of fell into these same 5 or 6 groups. And so I'd love to touch on each of them, because I know it's really going to be helpful for a lot of people who responded, seeing that, they're just these themes that keep coming back up. And a lot of them are related back to, hunger and satiety. And that's why it's so important. I think, the information that you're helping to share about these hormones and how they work, so people can understand how to, optimize for having, the best levels. One of the most common recurring themes was that their biggest challenge with doing keto was portion control and cravings. So they kind of are connected. Cravings for sweets, sugar, and carbs. Maybe we could kind of extrapolate that one first and talk about cravings. And what do you tell your clients who struggle with cravings for sweets and carbs and sugar? And a lot of people wrote things like, I miss fruit, I miss bread, I miss wine, and a lot of that is comfort, a lot of comfort foods and things. But yeah, what do you tell your clients when they tell you they have cravings for sweets and carbs?
Yeah, I tell them, suck it up. No, I think, so the way I kind of approach it is that some people don't like it when I say it this way, but food can be an addiction that is very similar to any other form of addiction, whether it's drug or alcohol. I've taken care of people who have withdrawn from heavy drugs, heroin, cocaine, and then I've taken care of people who have withdrawn from sugar. Inevitably, the ones who have withdrawn from sugar almost have a worse response because it's that significant. And the reason for that is because of the dopamine reward system, which is basically every time you get something that is sugar driven or a drug or an alcohol, you're getting a dopamine hit and you're getting this reward system. So you are actually trying to counterbalance that dopamine response. And if you look at functional MRIs where people are consuming sugar, they'll have a massive kind of excitation of the whole brain versus if it's a hardcore drug or alcohol, it'll be very specific areas of the brain. And so I usually will tell people that you have to go cold turkey. So you have to get rid of sweets. You have to get rid of the artificial sweeteners as well. And I think that's probably one of the pitfalls for a lot of people who are starting out, especially because there's a lot of products available and keto treats and different kind of desserts. Is initially you have to get rid of all of those. So I think as a society, because most things that we consume are very sweet oriented, you have to almost go completely to the opposite and go more to the savory kind of salty version, which is hard for a lot of people because we've been kind of ingrained that salt is dangerous, fat is dangerous, and so people are not used to those kind of consistencies and those tastes. But things that are artificial sweeteners, so a lot of times I'll see people will try to do like a diet soda or an artificial sweetener, even things like xylitol or erythritol, and have still food cravings and specifically sweet cravings because they're still getting a hit from the dopamine reward because the brain still senses that something is sweet, and so you're still getting an activation of that part of the brain. So the best way really is to kind of get rid of all sweets, at least for a significant period of time, which varies with people. I would say a month is kind of the minimum before you kind of rechange the circuits. For some people, it's got to be longer. And when you do that, I think in general, people will have a better response and be able to kind of kick the sweet kind of cravings a lot faster. When it comes to alcohol, that's a little bit harder because I think from a social perspective, it's still pretty much ingrained in our society that, if you go to a party, you have a cocktail. And so that one is a little bit more challenging for a lot of people, especially if you're, somebody who has to do business and part of your business is doing kind of social gatherings where you're drinking. For that, I generally will tell people to try to avoid it, or if they're going to have some alcohol, it's going to be once or twice a week at most. And that's not really so much for just being in ketosis, but that's really about you have to detox those calories before you do anything else. So Craig Emmerich, I think, and Maria Emmerich have a good talk where they talk about, priority of detoxification. So when you consume something, what do you have to burn first? And alcohol, if you consume it because it's a toxin, you have to detoxify it. And so that's going to shut down fat oxidation in the liver until all that alcohol is gone. And so if you're somebody who's transitioning over to ketosis and you're really kind of struggling and wondering why you're not getting into good ketone production and you're still drinking, that's probably what's causing it. And so that one, I tend to say, try to really minimize it. If you're going to have to do it with work, try to plan it so that's when you're going to consume your alcohol. That's also, it's a big challenge. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. No pun intended. It's a big challenge.
Hey guys, so I want to tell you about a brand new company that I just found out about called EMeals. What they do is offer a service that makes it a little bit easier to follow any kind of lifestyle. They've been doing it with paleo for a while and with other kinds of diet and lifestyle, and they just launched a brand new one for keto. So what they do is they have a keto plan which includes dietitian approved meals and targets the right macros for you. And the meals are easy to make and taste amazing. What happens is each week you get 7 dinners, 1 breakfast, 1 lunch, and 1 dessert. And that connects directly to a smart shopping list with online grocery pickup and delivery options. And that saves you time and money. So the meal plan directly connects to the shopping list, and you can go through this app that they have and pick out meals that you like, recipes you like, kind of customize and build your meal for the week. And it will take that, send it to your local grocery that does deliveries, and the groceries will show up at your door. And then you have the recipes in the app that you can make meals from during the week. So I think they offer a really great service. It really enables you to save time and money because of being directly connected to your local grocery store with this smart shopping list. It's a subscription-based app, and you also get access to other bonus collections of keto recipes from different keto authors and other influencers in the space that specialize in the keto space. 4-week keto is all you really need to maintain a ketogenic diet on their easy-to-use platform. So go to EMeals.com/keto today, and you'll get a 14-day trial if you want to test them out. That's EMeals.com/keto, and check them out. Let me know if you like the service, what you think of it. If it's something that you found helpful for you, I would love to know. So be sure to go check them out. I definitely recommend this as a fantastic app and service. Yes, I definitely agree. And there's one thing that I found has been really helpful for myself in going off of sugar and sweets. When I first went off of sugar completely, I first went to artificial sweeteners and then natural sweeteners. But like you said, I still had those cravings, the dopamine still being triggered. And it wasn't until I went off all sweeteners about a year ago that I really saw a huge difference in, that dependence on sweets. But one of the things that really helped me is if I would get a craving for sugar, it was usually at night, and then I would make eggs. And I found that was so helpful, was just making either an omelet or scrambled eggs. And it's such a whole food, and it's so nourishing, and it would usually give me something, to do, kind of to replace that like craving of having that sweet. A lot of, eggs are so nourishing as well. Like both of us posted this week about, eggs being a superfood, and you mentioned that they were superfood, but I did a video about eggs as well, like just how incredibly nutrient dense they are. And they're such a perfect food, and it really helps, the body just dealing with cravings and things. And I'm not sure if you talk about this much, but I know that another thing that can really help with just going off the sugar is adding in some mindfulness or meditation practice. Because I noticed that if you're coming from food addiction, like I was, a lot of times those triggers come when you're having a lot of uncomfortable thoughts, or you're focusing or dwelling or ruminating on things that are negative and making you feel bad. And so you have this desire to have something pleasurable to eat to distract you. And then the more meditation or mindfulness practice you have in your life, the more you can become aware, like, I don't feel good right now. What am I specifically focusing on? And can I bring some consciousness and awareness to that, and kind of like reverse engineer where the feeling is coming from, what thought you're focusing on? And it's been really helpful, I know, for me to have those kind of things there when those cravings hit. To assist with that transition. Because like you said, it's extremely difficult to go off of sugar, and, in some cases harder than drugs. Yeah,
I'm glad you bring up kind of the mindfulness and the psychological component, because I agree we don't talk much about it, or at least I don't see much posted about it, but there's both a kind of psychological component and then there's the physiological component. So if you are kind of ruminating or stressed or thinking about kind of the sugar, or let's say alcohol, since we're talking about it, there's actually a physiological response. And so you're basically getting into kind of a sympathetic drive. And what's happening with that is with chronic stress, and it could be stress that is not necessarily overt, but just kind of underlying. But just the idea of, let's say you're doing a transition, that is stressful for most people, especially because they've gone through different diets, plans in the past and have not been successful. And there's an association of like guilt or being ashamed because, they're not successful and it's their fault. And so the response really is that you're having significantly higher levels of cortisol. And when you have higher levels of cortisol, you have higher levels of insulin. So cortisol actually blocks insulin action in adipose tissues. And so in order to kind of combat that, your body will make more insulin. And when you have more insulin levels, that's actually going to drive hunger levels through the mechanisms that we talked about with leptin and ghrelin. And so you're actually going to crave more food. And if your go-to kind of way of combating stress is to reach for a chocolate bar or some form of sweet, that's really going to drive that behavior. And so I'm a big fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. where you're really kind of addressing the root cause of why you're acting in a certain way. But I'm also a big fan of doing mindfulness because that's actually physiologically reducing your stress levels, whether it's through meditation or yoga or just transcendental meditation or some form of just reflection. You're actually physiologically changing that and significantly influence your hormone levels. And so that tends to allow for more success and continuation of whatever diet plan you're on.
Yeah, that's really cool that you connected it back to the physiology. That it is actually influencing the physiology and those, stress hormones and everything, and not just, giving you some like tools to use, but it is actually having a physical effect, which is so cool. And the other part of that question and that recurring theme that I saw in people's challenges was portion control. So people were saying like, even on keto, I really struggle with portion control, going over my macros. And I also saw a lot of people saying that they were stalled or they weren't losing weight. And that seemed to kind of go together with the portion control. Obviously, if someone is having a difficult time controlling their portions, it's going to be hard to see weight loss, like even if you're doing low carb and keto. So what do you say to your clients who struggle with portion control?
We're going to have some really good questions today. It's ones that I really am not seeing enough discussion about. So thank you to your audience for asking these questions. But yeah, portion control is extremely important. So I think when anything becomes very kind of popular in trending, certain kind of ideas get trended as well. And one of the biggest trends that I saw in keto, which I disliked, was that you can eat as much fat as you want and you'll still lose weight. And on the flip side of that, for the last 50 years, we've been saying that losing weight is as simple as calories in equals calories out. Burn more calories by exercising more, eat less, and if you're in a deficit, you're going to lose weight. And both of those are inaccurate, right? If you are somebody who is sedentary and your total energy expenditure, how many calories you really are burning throughout the day is low, and yet you're eating massive amounts of fat, you're not going to lose weight. You might be in ketosis, but you're not going to lose weight. And so part of the idea with portion control is planning ahead. I think planning, and I'm not a planner, luckily my wife is, but planning is one of the most important keys, I think, to success in anything you do, but specifically with nutrition. And so one way that I'll have people really kind of focus on their portion control is to meal prep and cook for a couple days in advance. So for our family, what we'll do is we'll spend Sunday and generally we'll cook at least for 4 days for the week. And actually, divvy up the meals in Tupperware that's glass and have it already pre-prepared. The second thing is when we go to the grocery store, we have a list because if you're hungry and you go to a grocery store, you're going to just buy whatever looks really good. And generally, it's not going to be very good stuff for you. As far as, the calorie component, at this point, I don't really need to focus on the calorie component. But for those who are starting out and want to be kind of in an energy deficit, I'll definitely tell them to kind of weigh things out, at least initially, to get an idea of how much is it. So how much protein is actually 100 grams? For a lot of people, it's just a number. What does that actually mean? What does it look like? How much fat can you really consume in terms of, let's say you're eating avocado or cheese or dairy or something like that? How much is it really kind of going to relate to in terms of calorie intake? So getting that idea of knowing how much something really is, I think gives you a better idea of how much you should really be consuming, especially if you're starting out and especially if you are in a stalled pattern where you're doing everything right, you're hitting your macros right, you might be even having ketosis on the blood meter, and yet you're not losing weight. Well, you're probably still consuming too many calories, or you're not, moving enough in order to kind of burn those calories. And so those are kind of my go-to kind of quick and dirty ways of doing it. I'll use an app for a lot of people who are starting out. So I generally will use Chronometer just because it's free and it's user-friendly. And that'll give people an idea of like, okay, how much am I really consuming and what does that equate to? And that'll be pretty eye-opening for a lot of people to say, oh, wow, I'm really actually consuming 4,000 calories I'm hitting my macros perfectly, but still I'm not losing weight. Well, it's probably because you're hitting your macros, but you're just overdoing it in terms of how many calories you're consuming.
Right. And that, I think I love you that you brought up those points, and especially preparation and meal prep. And I guess you sort of do like some batch cooking on, you said on Sunday, and you kind of prepare everything out for the week. And then when you're hungry or those meal times or hunger hit, you have a meal that's pre-proportioned and you don't really have to put any thought into it. And it kind of takes away, that ability to overeat or, tendency to overeat, takes it out of the equation. I think that that's so helpful. And I'm going to plug my program right now because it just keeps coming to mind. Like in my 28-day challenge, I think one of the reasons people are so successful is I have it. Everything is pre-proportioned and I have the shopping list. And so people can just stick to those portions and know like that's what I'm having for the day. And I think that that makes a big difference in having preparation. If you have meal plans, if you have some kind of program, if you have something that you've calculated for yourself, or like you said, you're using an app, there's so many tools out there that you can use to ensure that you're not going over your portions. And a lot of it is just learning, like you said, figuring out what 100 grams of protein is or what these different things add up to. A lot of people I talk to say that keto helped them learn about food and food intake and learn what macronutrients are and calories are and all these things that, we just don't, a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about or, figuring out on their own. And then keto kind of forces you to have to learn about food and nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll second your pitch on your program. So it's an awesome program that I'll definitely recommend to anybody.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it. Now, I think one of the third things that was a real recurring theme was people having difficulty with social acceptance, with socializing, and having family support. So some of the common repetitions I saw were people saying that like they're keto, but no one else in their family is, or dealing with people commenting on their lifestyle because they're doing something different. And, I personally think that's one of the reasons our community is so amazing for people, is having other people around you. You need support when you're living a way that's different than everyone else, and it's a lot of pressure when you're around people who no one else is doing keto or low carb. And then, you're having to kind of deal with that scrutiny, I guess. So what advice do you have for people who are challenged by having that lack of like acceptance around them or in their workplace or their social life or family or friends?
Yeah, there's a couple of memes that go around the internet where it's like, when I was 300 pounds and diabetic and eating fast food, nobody criticized what I was doing. But as soon as I go, keto and eat fat, everybody thinks I'm going to die. And I mean, I always laugh when I see that, although it's kind of sad, because the reality is that, finally there's a way for a lot of people who have been frustrated by trying every fad diet out there and not being successful. And all of a sudden, finally, they found a way to really kind of regain control over their health. And I kind of equate it to being in a relationship with somebody. Let's say one person is an alcoholic and the other person doesn't drink, or one person is a chronic smoker and the other person doesn't. It's really hard and very stressful in a relationship. But what I have found in my experience is that just be patient, because when people start seeing the results, and obviously for most people it's going to be weight loss, but for a lot of people it'll be improvement in autoimmune disorders, obviously getting off medications, better mood, a lot of improvement with anxiety and depression. I think the most powerful thing that I have seen, and especially in areas of the country where you might not think that keto is actually gaining popularity, is that it's the success of individuals like family members, friends. Once they see that you are doing something, they might make fun of you at first, but once they see how tremendously beneficial it is to them, I guarantee you those people are going to turn around and not only not be unsupportive anymore, but start asking you questions. Okay, what are you doing? why are you looking so great? How did you lose so much weight? Why is this happening? And so over time, what I've seen is that it's actually building communities within actual communities, not necessarily online. But every time I go back, because I travel quite a bit around the country to see clients, every time I go back to those areas, I see more people actually getting involved in keto or low carb or something related. And so I think just being patient, not taking it personally, and just realizing that over time, more people are going to stop questioning you, making fun of you, and actually going to start asking you for advice. And I think once you see that transition, then it becomes even more powerful because you see, okay, not only is it impacting my health, but it's impacting my family's health or my friends' health, and so it's a movement that's happening, and it's just going to take time, but stick with it.
Hey guys, just taking a really quick break to talk about the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. If you're interested in doing a ketogenic diet for yourself, it's a great place to start. I teach you everything about how to follow a keto diet to get yourself into nutritional ketosis, and it includes 28 days of meal plans. It comes with weekly shopping lists, how to interpret results, how to test yourself, a complete guide to getting started on keto. If you've been keto for a while and you're just not getting the results that you want to in terms of your health or fat loss, or you are brand new to keto, the 28-day challenge is a great option because it also comes with my free coaching and support in our members Facebook group, and you can post any questions that you have about the meal plans, about keto, and I am there supporting you. We have an amazing community in our group because everybody in there is so excited about following keto, about having found something that really works well for them. And everyone in there is just so kind, caring, generous, and supportive. And it's a really fun place to be and hang out. So if you'd like more info on it, you can find it at ketogenicgirl.com. And it's the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And now back to our interview. That is such great advice. And it just goes back to that whole idea of don't try to change people around you, just inspire people by the way that you're living. And, if I find that the less you make a big deal out of it, the less other people do. So I remember when I started, I kind of made a big deal, hello, everyone should know that I eat low carb and keto. And maybe I was self-conscious about it, or I don't know what it was, but everyone else kind of really paid attention. And now, I do really keto and keto carnivore. I'm quite limited in my carbs more than before, but I don't really talk about it. And around my family and friends. And when we're together, I was just at a big family gathering recently for over a week and a half. And I just ate what I ate, and I just didn't draw attention to it. I didn't talk about it. I didn't bring it up. I didn't look at or judge or make comments about what anyone else is eating, which is never a good strategy. But I just was really self-confident about what I was doing, and I just didn't make a big deal out of it. I was I'm just eating real food. And, sometimes there were people asking me questions about what I was having, but I think a lot of that was just because they saw that I was really thriving and really energetic and really healthy and at my goals and fitness and, all these things. So then, like you said, if you just live what you're doing, then people will come to you, especially coworkers and people around you. I love when people come to me and I had one, woman who was so inspiring that her sister decided to join her, and then her mom did. And, she just enrolled all these other people in eating real food because of her own results and dedication to it. So I love that you said that, and I think that's really great advice. People, and don't get discouraged, just live it, and people will see the results of what you're
just
living.
on that note, I think two examples of things that people can do. One of my favorite clients, he decided that what he would do is actually, if there was an event to be hosted, he would be the one who would actually host it. So instead of going to a barbecue or something, he would start being the one who actually hosted it. That way he could control the food that was at the party. And he would cook a keto, but he wouldn't tell anybody that it was keto food. And people would absolutely love what he was making. And then if they asked him like what he was doing, he would say, well, this is how I'm eating. This is the benefit. But that was after the fact, after people had actually eaten the food. So it's not so much like, somebody who's vegan spouting off about how if you don't eat vegan, then you're going to kill the whole environment and being judgmental, or if you're carnivore, that's the only way you can eat and everything else is absolute garbage. And I'm just using those two as an example, not to get hate mail from vegan and carnivore individuals. But I think if you just, as you mentioned, are not so vocal about what you're doing, but actually just doing it, and then people can see, number one, it's extremely tasty, but number two, it's not this crazy woo-woo diet where you can only eat like, shrubs you picked from a forest. It's actually real food. That tends to go a long way versus just kind of spouting off the benefits of being in ketosis, which most people are probably just going to roll their eyes at you at that point.
Yeah, exactly. That's so well said. Now, I have some rapid fire questions for you that are more just about kind of how you're doing keto these days. And, I know you're a biohacker and you've been doing this for a while. And you also, like we've talked about before, you have a lot of this dialed in, but I'm sure you're always kind of tweaking things and making adjustments. What does your keto look like now compared to kind of when you first started? Are there any major shifts or differences?
Yeah, so it depends on the week what experiment I'm doing, because I'm usually doing some sort of experiment. So when I started, and this is quite a ways back, I was, focused more on hitting macros and trying to get percentages dialed in, not really focused on caloric intake, not really focused on micronutrients. And that has changed dramatically. So quite the opposite now. I don't focus on macros. I focus on the highest quality food. Micronutrients is really kind of where my focus is at. And I'm focused a lot more on fasting, time restricted feeding, and obviously all the other biohacks that I'm doing. But I'd say the main thing that I got rid of was dairy. So when I was starting off, I definitely did a lot more dairy, and I tested myself for certain allergens. I have pretty good response to a lot of the American dairy products, and so I tried to avoid them. When I'm traveling in Europe, I'll definitely eat dairy because I don't have the same response. So I look at it more kind of what is the inflammatory response to the food that I'm consuming. And I'm focused a lot more on seasonality. So trying to get food that is within the seasons of where I'm located. Right now, I'm located in Puerto Rico, and so there really isn't no season, so it doesn't work as well. But for instance, if I'm in Pacific Northwest and it's, in the fall, I'll try to really focus on foods that are grown locally within those seasons, because I think there's a big emphasis lately on globalization, allowing you to have access to whatever you want at any time. And yet, from kind of an ancestral standpoint, we weren't designed that way. We would have fruit, when it was in season, but then we wouldn't have it the rest of the year. And so I'll do that. I'll have berries when it's in season if they're, locally grown and I can actually go pick them. And then the rest of the time I won't consume them. And so kind of really focusing more on that. And a lot of kind of fasting would be probably the biggest thing that has changed. A lot more long-term fasting, looking in alternate day fasting and different experiments just to see how my body responds to different time periods of eating.
That's really fun to play with and kind of see, like, I remember noticing a big difference if I close my eating window like at 8 or 9 p.m. versus like 5 or 6, that I would see a difference and kind of a big impact. And I've actually reduced my dairy quite a bit from when I started as well. And for me, it was more that it kind of, I find, interferes with my satiety signaling. Mm-hmm. Like it kind of interferes and messes with my appetite. Like this ability, I really feel like I've reclaimed this ability to eat intuitively. Yep. And it operates and functions best for me when I don't have dairy. If I do, then I don't feel like I have the same connection with that like intuitive sense of nourishment, that it's more like it, I don't know, because it's so energy dense. Like dairy is so delicious, and it kind of can take over some of the natural signaling. I think So yeah, that's interesting you found.
On the topic of dairy, I think one of the issues with dairy specifically, and partially one of the reasons why you were experiencing that is, yeah, it's energy dense, but also the types of amino acids that are contained in the protein tend to be very insulinogenic. And so you're getting a higher insulin level, and so that's going to impact your satiety quite a bit based on kind of what we talked about earlier with the ghrelin and leptin response. So it's not surprising that you were experiencing something like that. And that's also one of the reasons why I tend to avoid it.
Are there certain foods other than dairy that the amino acid profile is more insulinogenic and some that are less?
So, well, dairy is a big one. I would say whey protein can be an issue for certain people, especially if they're insulin resistant. That's a pretty common one. In general, I would say most like real food kind of forms of protein are going to be balanced out. And because you have fat and fiber with it in the form of collagen, it tends to not be as significant. But those would be the main two that I see pretty frequently with people having issues.
Is it because of the leucine or
Yeah, leucine or isoleucine.
I mean, I know it's an essential amino acid, so you want to make sure you get it, but then it can be insulinogenic for people. And is that maybe less so when you're on keto or low carb and you have a lower insulin to glucagon relationship? Or?
So it's a dose dependent issue too. So if you're taking it kind of in a shake form versus in a actual food form, and we're really getting kind of into like the nitty gritty fine tuning of things when you are in ketosis or been doing it for a while, but yet you're not getting the exact response you want. That's a good time to start really focusing on the kind of micro details. So instead of doing a protein shake in the morning, it might be a better idea to get your protein source from an actual piece of steak. And so, yeah, while it's essential, it also can cause more of an insulin response.
I think that's why steak and eggs are, it's just like, it's my favorite breakfast, but it's such a well-balanced keto meal because you have the fat that comes with it naturally, which has that lowered insulin response with it. And it's just how the food comes, it's the form it comes in. And it's so naturally ketogenic in its macronutrient percentage.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really cool. Now back to the rapid fire questions. What is your go-to keto restaurant order?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I mean, you guys
I try to
eat out a lot. So.
Yeah, I don't eat out a lot. And the reason I don't eat out a lot is because of the oils that are used in cooking. So it's usually going to be a vegetable or seed oil. So I try to avoid it as much as possible. I would say probably ceviche is going to be my go-to just because I'm in the Caribbean. But it's really, really hard to mess with ceviche. Mm-hmm. And you're getting, good protein from fish and really the vegetable component is going to be minimal. So I don't know if that's a great one. If not, it would be a steak, and I'll make sure that it's, not cooked in oil. So I usually will be pretty vocal about asking for, either cooked in butter or just grilled without any oil or kind of sauce put on it. I think it's hard to mess with it that way. And so that's usually my go-to.
Because I know you do a lot of travel, and do you have certain travel hacks to avoid eating out as much, or
yeah, I usually either do an Airbnb or a hotel that has like a kitchenette so that I can cook my food. What I'll do is if I'm doing it for business and I'm going to go out, I tend to eat something before so that I'm not starving, and then I'll just kind of engage in conversation and enjoy more of that, and just maybe get an appetizer or something so that I'm not antisocial, but yet I'm already controlled in terms of what I've eaten, so I'm not starving, and I won't just kind of eat whatever's available. I tend to look for stores that I know have what I want as far as food, and I just try to stock up. So I'll eat, usually when I'm traveling, I'll actually eat earlier in the day. So I'll have a really good breakfast so that I'm pretty much full for the rest of the day. And so that way it's better controlled. I think really, again, it goes back to planning and controlling your environment as much as possible so that you have better control over your decisions. And so that's kind of some of my simple hacks.
Yeah, and it goes back to the theme of being prepared. Like you were saying before, how much that helps with portion control. And I did an episode of the podcast on Saturday about tips for traveling with keto, and my number one was get a place with a kitchen.
Yeah.
You can make your own meals, and eating before going to those events so that you can focus on connecting with people and enjoying the experience. And that's really like the whole point of, going to these things, right? Is to connect with people and not like be focused on yourself and making sure that you are getting, the right foods and things. Like it's such a distraction and takes away so much from all that connection that you could potentially be having with people and, great conversation and that kind of thing. So I fully agree with that. What can people look out for you? I know you're always testing and tweaking things. You guys have been doing some, interesting experiments with the neurofeedback. Like, what are some things that you're excited about and people can look out from you in the next little while?
Yeah, so I'm on social media and, all the internet world. I'm focusing right now, I'm working with Level device on breath acetone measurements and going to do some experiments and basically to show that when you're checking blood ketone levels, you're really just getting a snapshot in time, and it might not be as informative as you think it would be. Obviously, if you're not producing any ketones and it's not showing up in your blood, that's a pretty good indication that something is not working. But I'm trying to go beyond that and working on certain things as far as things like coefficient of variation, figuring out kind of, instead of just having a snapshot in time of what you're doing, is there a way to really show kind of the progression? Are you getting better? Are you getting worse? And so I'm working with them in a company called Heads Up Health that I'm a part of, where we're going to start introducing new metrics for people to actually be able to measure a little bit more intuitive and detailed information. So that's something I'm really excited about working on. And then I'll be starting a new podcast in the next couple months. And so you will have to be on as one of my first guests to continue the conversation, but it'll be coming out relatively soon. So it'll be kind of diving deeper into the science and kind of the know-how for people who are interested in not only ketosis, but also all the biohacking stuff that I've been doing.
I can't wait for your podcast. I mean, there's so many podcasts popping up all the time, but there really are not that many that are solely focused on keto. And really, from a doctor's perspective, I think that you're going to be adding such a great resource for people. And I can't wait for it to be out. And I know it's going to be among my top, podcasts and resources. So I'm really excited that you're doing that. I can't wait for it to be out, and it'll be fun to come on and chat more with kind of your questions for me and just, delving into some of these topics and biohacking. So that's really exciting, and congrats on that. And your book, how's your book?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that. Yeah, Keto Plus is going to be coming out. I think it's scheduled for end of June, July. And so it's basically, again, a kind of deeper dive into the science behind a lot of the biohacks that I've been doing and talking about, and how it relates specifically to those who are ketogenic, how you can really kind of address some of those things that you and I have talked about here today. How do you get control over insulin, glucose, glucagon, ghrelin, and leptin? How could you maybe improve your ketosis and get over those kind of humps when you're stalling out? I mean, there's a lot of good ways to really boost your ability to be in ketosis and, be healthy and enjoy it at the same time.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait for that launch and release and to get my hands on a copy. Once you're out, it'll be super fun to read that. And thank you so much again for being on this show and sharing so much of your valuable knowledge and experience with some of these really important challenges that, people face when wanting to do this lifestyle successfully. So thank you so much for being here, John.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here today and tuning in. I had such a blast chatting with John, and I love that we really got to cover a lot of ground with regards to common challenges that people face doing keto, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did getting to record it. I would like to invite you to check out the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. A lot of the things that we talked about on today's episode, I find are really solved by doing a ketogenic meal plan like the one that I designed, the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And a lot of that comes down to having someone already calculate everything for you, having the macros all dialed in for you, having this meal plan with all the portions already outlined for you, it really helps address a lot of the portion control issues, and having everything calculated already really helps with preparation and doing batch prep. A lot of people on the challenge will pick out a day, say on Saturday or Sunday, and they'll meal prep ahead for the week, and they'll pick 2 or 3 days from the plan that they love, and they'll repeat it, such as day 5, which has the burger with my special keto burger sauce, and repeat that. And you can do that as many times as you like, and it really makes preparation and following keto and the meal plans a lot easier, and doing that batch prepping and meal prep on the weekend. And the meal plans also come with a shopping list. They come with a full guide to testing yourself for ketosis. And the best part is they include my support and coaching in our members Facebook group, which is an awesome community. I love being in there, and it really helps so much having other people doing this program with you and alongside, and people who've done it already and successfully reached their goals there to inspire you and to support you. And having that community built in is so important. Our success rates go way, way up when we're doing any kind of diet or lifestyle change when we have a buddy. And I'm here to be your buddy, to be your guide, and help you with your journey, because you can post any questions that you have about keto, about the meal plans, about low carb, and I am there to answer your questions and to support you as you go. And I just think it makes such a big difference to have a coach and a support group and a supportive community around you. So check out the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. Just a word of caution, there is another 20-day keto challenge that's being sold. It is not mine. I only sell my program from ketogenicgirl.com. So if you see a link to that, it's a copycat version that has kind of popped up in the last year. It also has a similar name, 20-day Ketogenic Challenge. But if you are looking for my program, which comes with my support and coaching, you can only get it from ketogenicgirl.com, and make sure that you are purchasing the one from me, because I have some people who have purchased this other program thinking that it's my program, and the coaching and support is not included because it's not the program that I formulated and that has had so much success. If you want to read and check out some of the success stories, you can go to ketogenicgirl.com and click on testimonials and reviews or success stories, and you can read some of the dozens and dozens of success stories of people who have done the challenge. And if you join the program, you'll get to interact with so many of those people in the group who've had real success and are there to share tips and tricks for making all of this so much easier and so much fun. So check out the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. And until the next episode, I hope you have a fat-filled rest of your day. A few disclaimers. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. The information presented on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to this podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a full health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you and to rule out any conditions or contraindications that may pose risk or that are incompatible with a ketogenic diet. A keto diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown, so you must consult your physician to find this out. Anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian.